The last words my grandfather left behind were not a gentle piece of advice, but a cryptic sentence. Take our family photo back home. It is your legacy. At the time, I thought he simply wanted me to keep a family memento. But after he passed away, I took the photo down from the wall. And what I found on the back left me frozen. A thick envelope, tightly sealed with tape. My name is Gabriel Hano. I'm 25 years old, born and raised in Kearney, Nebraska, a small town with endless cornfields and dusty red roads whenever the wind blows through. It sounds poetic, but my childhood was far from dreamy. It was a string of long, lonely days and emotional wounds that never healed. On the surface, my family was well off. My father, Reed Hanot, was a real estate businessman, always dressed in sharp suits and wearing sunglasses even when the sun wasn't out. My mother, whom I was forced to call Mom despite feeling no warmth from her, was a sharp-witted woman, always busy with the town's women's club parties. Then there were my siblings, my sister Monica and my brother Marcus, two people who always felt like strangers living under the same roof. Monica, 7 years older than me, was beautiful and haughty, always looking at me with disdain. Marcus, 5 years older, was burly and rough, never hesitating to use his fists to assert his dominance in the house. And me? I was the youngest, the bastard child, as my father called me in his fits of rage. From a young age, I knew I didn't belong here, didn't belong to this family. No one said it outright, but the whispers, the cold glances, and the venomous words carved themselves deep into my mind. "You're a burden," Monica once sneered when I accidentally broke one of Mom's favorite glasses. "This house would be so much more peaceful without you." Marcus was more direct, once pushing me down the stairs and laughing loudly. "You bastard, you think you deserve to be here?" I didn't understand why they hated me so much. I was just a kid wanting to be loved, to belong somewhere. But with each passing day, I felt the chasm between me and my so-called family grow wider. My parents never hugged me, never asked about my days at school, never cared about what I thought or felt. Instead, I got threats. "If you don't behave, I'll send you to an orphanage," my father once growled, pointing a finger in my face when I spilled milk on the dining table. My mother just watched, her eyes cold as ice, not saying a word. In those moments, I could only lower my head, swallowing my tears. I was scared that they would actually do it, that they would send me away, discard me like an unwanted object. I learned to stay silent, to endure, to become invisible in my own home. But silence didn't mean the pain stopped. Every word, every contemptuous glance from them was like a knife slicing into my heart, leaving scars I knew would never heal. Once, when I was about 8, Monica and Marcus played a prank I'll never forget. They locked me in the dark basement for an entire night just because I dared to take a cookie from Monica's jar. I screamed, banged on the door, begged them to let me out, but all I got was their giggles from the other side. "Stay down there and make friends with the rats, you bastard," Marcus yelled before walking away. I sat huddled in the darkness, listening to my heart pounding, trying to tell myself everything would be okay. But that night I felt smaller and more worthless than ever. The next morning when my mother opened the door, she didn't ask if I was okay, didn't hug me, didn't comfort me. She just said coldly, "Don't make your siblings angry next time." I nodded, not daring to look her in the eye. I knew in her eyes I was nothing. But not everything was darkness. In the cold storm of my family, I found a refuge, a small flickering flame that was enough to warm my heart. My grandparents. Their house was on the outskirts of Kearney, a small wooden home with a garden full of daisies and an old swing I loved to sit on for hours. Every weekend I found ways to escape my house to be with them. It was the only place I felt loved, seen as a human being. My grandfather, a tall man with silver hair and sharp eyes, always seemed stern. He had been a farmer before turning to business and building a fortune that I only knew was a lot of money through the whispers of adults. He wasn't one for sweet words, but he was fair. He taught me how to tie my shoes, how to hold a hoe in the garden, and most importantly, He taught me about integrity. Gabriel, he once said, his voice low but powerful, a person can lose everything, but they must never lose their self-respect. Stand tall, no matter how many times life knocks you down. My grandmother was different. She was gentle like a summer breeze, always ready to pull me into her arms whenever I ran to her. She had soft but calloused hands from gardening, and the smell of her freshly baked cookies seemed to linger in the air. Every time I visited, she'd pull me to the kitchen table, place a plate of warm cookies in front of me, and ask, "How's your day, Gabriel?" It was a question no one in my family ever asked, and every time I heard it, I wanted to burst into tears, but I held back, only smiling and saying, "I'm fine." I never told my grandparents about what happened at home, not because I didn't trust them, but because I was afraid. My father had warned me with a chilling glare, "Don't ever open your mouth about what happens in this house, Gabriel. If you do, you'll regret it." I was scared he'd do something terrible, and I was scared of losing the only refuge I had, my grandparents. But somehow they seemed to understand. They didn't ask, but they always looked at me with love and concern. My grandmother would hold my hand, stroke my hair, and whisper, "You are a precious gift, Gabriel. Never forget that." With them, I wasn't the bastard child. I was Gabriel, their grandson, someone they loved unconditionally. The days at their house were filled with running through the garden, listening to Grandpa's stories about his youth, or helping Grandma weed the flower beds. Those moments were the only light in my dark childhood. I dreamed of one day living with them forever, leaving behind the cold house I called home. But life is never as simple as a child's dream. When I was 12, my father began to tightly control my visits to my grandparents. "You don't need to cling to them all the time," he said, his voice laced with irritation. "They're old, let them be." I knew the real reason wasn't concern for them, but because he didn't want me to get too close to them. Perhaps he was afraid I'd say something, that I'd reveal the secrets he wanted buried. Gradually, my visits to my grandparents became less frequent. I had to sneak away, seizing moments when my parents were busy to run to their house. Every time I left their home, it felt like I was leaving a piece of my heart behind. I was terrified that one day I would lose the only sanctuary I had. And then, that day came, not because my parents forbade it, but because of something far worse. I was 23 years old, freshly graduated from college with an architecture degree, when I received a call from my grandmother. I was sitting in my small rented room in Lincoln, engrossed in sketching a design for an internship project, when the phone rang. The screen showed my grandmother's name, and my heart suddenly tightened. She rarely called at this hour unless something important had happened. "Gabriel," her voice trembled through the phone, so frail I barely recognized it. "Your grandfather, he's not well. Can you come right away?" I don't remember how I responded. All I know is that in an instant I dropped my pencil, grabbed my jacket, and rushed out the door. The journey from Lincoln to Kearney had never felt so long. 3 hours on the bus, I sat huddled, my hands clenched tightly together, trying to suppress the terrible thoughts flooding my mind. But I couldn't stop them. The image of my grandfather, the strong man who once carried me on his shoulders, who taught me to stand tall in the face of adversity, now lying motionless somewhere in a hospital, made it hard to breathe. I prayed silently, begging that he would be okay, that I would still have the chance to tell him how much I loved him. When I arrived at the hospital, dusk was settling in. The smell of antiseptic and the beeping of machines in the hallway sent shivers down my spine. My grandmother was sitting on a bench outside the hospital room, her frail hands clasped tightly, her eyes red and swollen. She stood up abruptly when she saw me, rushing to hug me as if I were her only lifeline. "Gabriel, you're here," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. I held her tightly, trying to give her some strength, though I was trembling myself. "How's Grandpa doing, Grandma?" I asked, my voice breaking. She shook her head, tears streaming down her wrinkled cheeks. "The doctor said he has lung cancer, final stage. They've done all they could, but..." She didn't finish the sentence, only gripped my hand tightly. It felt like the ground beneath me collapsed. Cancer. Final stage. Those words pierced through my heart, sharp and cold. My grandfather, the man I always thought was invincible, was now fighting a battle no one could win. I wanted to scream, to smash something to release the pain, but I just stood there, silent, letting my grandmother lean on my shoulder. When I entered the hospital room, I barely recognized him. He lay on the bed, gaunt, his skin pale, his eyes sunken. The few remaining strands of silver hair clung to his forehead, and the breathing tube made his face look unfamiliar. But when he saw me, his eyes lit up, if only with a faint glimmer. He reached out a trembling hand toward me, and I quickly grasped it, terrified that if I let go, he would disappear forever. "Gabriel," he whispered, his voice hoarse, "you're here." I knelt beside the bed, tears spilling despite my efforts to hold them back. "Grandpa, I'm here. I'm right here with you." I didn't know what else to say. I just wanted him to know I was there, that I wouldn't leave. For the next 6 months, I practically lived at the hospital. I took a leave from my internship, moved back to Kearney, and spent every possible moment by my grandfather's side. My grandmother and I took turns caring for him, from small tasks like feeding him spoonfuls of porridge to sitting beside him, holding his hand, and listening to him recount old stories I knew by heart. Stories about his youth, how he built his fortune from nothing, the dreams he had for the family. But this time, his voice was weaker, and sometimes he paused, gasping for breath, as if every word cost him immense effort. My parents, Monica and Marcus, showed up, but only to keep up appearances. My father would come, stand in the corner of the room, ask the doctor a few perfunctory questions, then leave, citing his busy work schedule. My mother brought expensive bouquets, placed them at the head of his bed, and sat scrolling through her phone, barely glancing at him. Monica and Marcus were even worse. They'd show up, say a few hollow words, then whisper to each other about the estate, about what Grandpa would leave behind. I overheard them, their words cutting into me like knives. They didn't care about him. Not really. They only cared about the money. I tried not to let it get to me, but every time I saw them, a surge of anger boiled in my chest. My grandfather was fighting for his life every day, and all they could think about was dividing his wealth. I wanted to scream at them, to throw them out of the room, but I knew Grandpa wouldn't want that. He just held my hand quietly, as if to say he understood, that he didn't blame me for feeling this way. One afternoon, when it was just the two of us in the room, he pulled me close. The faint sunlight streamed through the window, casting soft shadows on his face. He looked at me, his eyes still sharp despite his weakened body. "Gabriel," he said, his voice slow but resolute, "when I'm gone, take the photo of you, me, and Grandma home. That's the legacy I want to leave you." I was stunned, unsure why he was bringing up a photo at a time like this. I knew the photo well. It hung on the living room wall at their house, taken when I was about 5, standing between him and Grandma, all three of us smiling brightly. It was one of my happiest memories, but why was he calling it a legacy? I wanted to ask, to understand more, but his eyes seemed to signal that I didn't need to know just yet. I only nodded, squeezing his hand tightly. "Yes, Grandpa, I promise." That night, I sat by his bed watching him sleep, his breathing mingling with the sound of the machines. A deep fear gripped me, fear that he could slip away at any moment, that I would lose the only person in the world who loved me unconditionally. I leaned down and whispered, "Grandpa, you have to stay strong. I need you." But he didn't hear. He was lost in sleep, and I could only sit there, tears falling silently. 6 months passed, each day a battle. There were moments when I thought he might pull through, when he'd laugh and tell me how he tricked Grandma into marrying him years ago. But there were also days when he was so weak he could only lie still, eyes closed, as if ready to let go. My grandmother and I did everything we could, but deep down I knew his time was running out. One morning as I entered the room, the doctor called me aside. He looked at me, his expression grave. "Mr. Hannett, your grandfather's condition. We've done all we can. It's likely only a matter of days now." I don't know how long I stood there, but when I returned to the room, I knelt by his bed, holding his hand tightly. He opened his eyes, looked at me, and gave a faint smile. "Gabriel," he whispered, "you are my pride." Those were the last words he spoke to me. 2 days later, he passed away quietly, just as he had lived, without fanfare, but leaving a void in me that nothing could fill. I sat by his side, holding his hand until it grew cold. My grandmother held me and we cried together in silence, while outside the world carried on as if nothing had changed. But for me, everything had changed. And I didn't know then that his final instruction, about the photo, about the legacy, would unravel a secret that would turn my entire life upside down. The days after my grandfather's passing left me feeling like a hollow shell. Their house, once my sanctuary of peace, now felt strangely empty. Every corner of the garden, every chair, every teacup on the kitchen table carried his shadow. I sat on the old swing in the yard, watching the daisies in my grandmother's garden sway in the breeze, a dull ache gripping my chest. Grandma tried to stay strong, but I saw her red-rimmed eyes whenever she thought I wasn't looking. We leaned on each other, two souls who had lost the flame that warmed our lives. Grandpa's funeral was simple, just as he had wished. Only family and a few close friends attended. My father, Reed, stood there in an expensive black suit, his face stern but not a single tear in sight. My mother, as always, maintained her perfect facade, lips pressed tightly, her eyes hidden behind oversized sunglasses. Monica and Marcus were there too, but I could tell their gazes weren't fixed on Grandpa's casket. They darted around as if calculating something. I stood by Grandma, holding her hand, trying to ignore them. But deep down, I knew they weren't here to mourn him. They came for something else, something I didn't yet dare to think about. After the funeral, I returned to my small apartment in Kearney, trying to resume life. But every night I lay awake, haunted by the image of Grandpa on his hospital bed and his cryptic instruction about the photo. Why had he emphasized it? It was just a picture, a family memory. So why had he called it my legacy? The question gnawed at me, but I wasn't brave enough to return to my grandparents' house, to face the reality that he was gone forever. Then one morning the phone rang. It was Grandpa's lawyer, Harold Grayson, an older man with a deep, calm voice. "Gabriel," he said, "you need to be at my office this Friday. We'll be reading your grandfather's will." I nodded over the phone, though a wave of unease surged within me. A will? I hadn't thought much about it. To me, Grandpa was the man who taught me about integrity and love, not money or assets. But I knew for my family his will would be a bombshell, and I wasn't sure I was ready to face it. Friday came, and I put on my cleanest dress shirt, standing before the mirror and telling myself to be strong. I arrived at the lawyer's office, a small but dignified room with wooden shelves overflowing with papers. Grandma was already there, sitting upright, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. My parents, Monica and Marcus, were there too, and the air in the room felt heavy, like a storm was about to break. My father sat at the front, his cold eyes scanning the room as if sizing everyone up. My mother sat beside him, lips pursed, fidgeting with the diamond ring on her finger. Monica and Marcus whispered to each other, occasionally shooting me irritated glances. Mr. Grayson entered, holding a thick stack of documents. He put on his glasses, sat down slowly, and began. "Today we are here to read the will of Mr. William Hannett, duly executed and notarized on March 12, 2023. He paused, looking around the room. My heart pounded harder. There was something in Mr. Grayson's voice that unsettled me, as if he knew something we didn't. He began reading. The will detailed Grandpa's estate, a fortune far beyond anything I could have imagined. Shares in real estate companies, multiple plots of land in Nebraska and neighboring states, stocks in several major companies, and a substantial amount of cash. In total, Mr. Grayson estimated the value at over $15 million. I sat there, stunned. I knew Grandpa was wealthy, but this figure was beyond anything I had ever considered. $15 million? It was a world I had never touched. My father smirked, a triumphant smile flickering across his face. My mother sat up straighter, her eyes gleaming. Monica and Marcus exchanged excited glances as if they'd just won the lottery. Only Grandma and I remained silent, me out of shock, and her. She just bowed her head, her hands trembling. Then Mr. Grayson continued, "Per the terms of this will, the entirety of Mr. William Hannot's estate is to be transferred to his son, Mr. Reed Hannot." The room erupted. My father let out a loud laugh, slamming his hand on the table. "That's my father," he said, his voice brimming with pride. My mother smiled for the first time that day, and Monica clapped, whispering something to Marcus. I looked at them, a strange pain rising in my chest. It wasn't that I expected to receive anything. I had never thought about it. But seeing their glee, seeing how they turned the pain of losing Grandpa into an opportunity to get rich, filled me with disgust. I turned to Grandma seeking some comfort, but she only looked at me, her eyes full of meaning. I didn't understand, but something in her gaze sent a chill through me. It was as if she knew something I didn't. When the meeting ended, my father approached me, the smile on his face now replaced by a sneer of contempt. "Don't get any ideas, Gabriel," he said, his voice icy. "You're not getting a cent. I'll keep it all, and later Monica and Marcus will get their share. But you, a bastard like you, doesn't deserve anything." His words stabbed through my heart like a knife. I stood there speechless, watching him walk away. My mother and siblings trailing behind, laughing and chatting as if they'd just won a high-stakes game. Grandma took my hand, giving it a gentle squeeze, but I didn't dare look at her. I was afraid she'd see the tears welling in my eyes. That night I returned to my apartment and lay on my bed, my mind reeling. My father's words echoed in my head. "A bastard like you." I had heard that phrase 1,000 times, but this time it hurt more than ever. I thought of Grandpa, of the days he held my hand and taught me about self-respect. I thought of his instruction, about the photo. And then, like a bolt of lightning, I sat up. The photo. He had said it was my legacy. Why? Why had he emphasized it so much? I couldn't wait any longer. The next morning I drove to my grandparents' house, my heart pounding as if it might burst from my chest. The small wooden house still stood there, silent amidst the vibrant yellow daisies. But the air now felt heavy, as if the house itself were in mourning. I stepped onto the porch, my hands trembling as I inserted the key into the lock. When I pushed the door open, the familiar scent of my grandmother's cookies wafted through. And I saw her sitting at the kitchen table, her frail hands clutching a teacup. She looked up, her red-rimmed eyes lighting up when she saw me. "Gabriel," she called, her voice gentle but tinged with worry. "You're here." I walked over and hugged her tightly, feeling the warmth from her frail body. "Grandma," I whispered, "I need to get the photo. The one Grandpa told me about." She nodded as if she had been expecting this moment. "It's in the living room, you know where," she said. But there was something strange in her eyes, as if she were hiding a secret. I didn't ask further, only walked into the living room, where the photo still hung on the wall beside the fireplace. Me at 5 years old, standing between my grandparents, all of us smiling brightly like summer sunshine. I reached up, carefully taking the frame down, my heart pounding so hard I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. And then I saw it. On the back of the frame, secured tightly with tape, was a thick envelope. My name was written on it in my grandfather's firm handwriting. To Gabriel. I glanced at Grandma, who stood in the doorway, her hands clasped tightly, her eyes a mix of worry and anticipation. I took a deep breath, peeled the envelope off, feeling as if I were opening a door to a world I had never known. Inside the envelope were 3 things: a carefully folded piece of paper, a handwritten letter, and a photograph. I picked up the photo first, and immediately a jolt ran down my spine. It was me, a baby about 6 months old, cradled in the arms of a young man. He had bright eyes, a radiant smile, and dark hair just like mine. But I had never seen him before. My heart raced, a strange premonition rising within me. I turned to Grandma, my voice trembling. "Grandma, who is this?" She didn't answer right away, only stepped forward and placed a hand on my shoulder. "Open the letter, Gabriel," she said, her voice soft as a breeze. "Your grandfather wanted you to know the truth." I unfolded the letter, my hands shaking so much I nearly dropped it. My grandfather's words appeared, each one striking my heart like a hammer. "Gabriel," he wrote, "if you're reading this letter, it means I'm gone. But I want you to know the truth I've kept hidden for too long. You are not Reed's son. You are the son of Jonathan, Reed's younger brother, my youngest son. Jonathan passed away in an accident when you were very young. I was wrong to disown Jonathan, and that is the greatest regret of my life. You are Jonathan's legacy, and I want to make it right for you." I stopped reading, my breath catching in my throat. Jonathan? My real father. The world seemed to spin around me as if the floor beneath my feet were crumbling. I looked at the photo again, at the face of the man, my father, Jonathan, and felt a strange mix of pain and curiosity. Who was he? Why had I never been told about him? I turned to Grandma, tears welling in my eyes. "Grandma, why? Why didn't anyone tell me?" Grandma sat down beside me, taking my hand, her eyes brimming with tears and filled with pain. "Gabriel, my dear," she said, her voice choking as if she were trying to hold back a wave of emotions. "We wanted to protect you, to let you grow up like other children. Reed, he agreed to raise you after Jonathan passed away." I shook my head, my mind reeling, trying to process what she had just said. But why didn't Grandpa tell me? Why did he keep it from me all these years? My voice broke, raw with both pain and desperation. I wanted to understand, to know why the man I loved most had kept such a monumental secret. Grandma sighed, her frail hands trembling as they gripped mine tightly. "Your grandfather, he carried a burden of guilt too heavy, Gabriel. He was wrong, terribly wrong, when he disowned Jonathan, your father. It was over something trivial, something that, looking back, he realized was meaningless. Jonathan refused to marry the woman your grandfather had arranged for him. He wanted to live life on his own terms, to love with his heart. Your grandfather, with his rigid ways back then, couldn't accept it. He cut off contact with Jonathan, disowned the son he loved so dearly, and cast him out of the family. But when Jonathan died in that accident..." She paused, her voice breaking, tears streaming down her wrinkled cheeks. "Your grandfather felt like he lost his entire world. He was consumed by guilt, tormented every day for losing his youngest son over his own pride." I sat silently, a sharp pain piercing my chest. My father, Jonathan, disowned just for wanting to live true to himself? I looked at the photo in my hand, at the face of the young man smiling radiantly as he held me, and my tears began to fall. "Then why didn't Grandpa tell me?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Why did he let me grow up not knowing who my real father was?" Grandma stroked my hair just as she did when I was a child. "Your grandfather wanted to protect you, Gabriel. He was afraid that if you knew you were an orphan, that your father was gone forever, you wouldn't be able to bear it. He wanted you to grow up like other children with a home, a family, even if that family was far from perfect. But more than that, he didn't have the courage to face his own mistake. Every time he looked at you, he saw Jonathan, his smile, his eyes, his strength in you. Telling you the truth meant admitting he was wrong, that he lost Jonathan because of his stubbornness. He couldn't bear that pain." She paused, taking a deep breath as if gathering strength to continue. "But your grandfather loved you, Gabriel. You were all that remained of Jonathan, and he wanted to make things right for you, for your father. This will, this letter, it's his way of atoning, of giving you what you deserve." I returned to the letter, reading on, each line tearing at my heart. Grandpa wrote, "In the original will, I left my entire estate to Reed with the condition that he share 50% with you. But I don't trust Reed, so I created a second will, and you can make this new will public if Reed refuses to give you any share of the estate after I'm gone. Stand up and claim what is rightfully yours. The greedy do not deserve what I've left behind. I opened the other document, the new will duly notarized, dated after the one revealed to the family. In it, Grandpa left nearly the entire estate, stocks, real estate, shares, to me, with only a small portion for my father, Reed. I sank into the chair, my mind spinning. $15 million. 90% of it was mine. But more than the money, what left me stunned was the truth about my identity. I wasn't Reed's son. I was Jonathan's, a man I had never known. I looked at the photo again, tracing the face of the man, my father. Tears fell silently, soaking the picture. I felt both heartbroken and relieved, as if a door had opened, but at the same time it pulled me into a storm I wasn't ready to face. What was he like, Grandma? I asked, my voice faltering. My father, what was he like? Grandma gave a sad smile, stroking my hair as she did when I was young. Jonathan was special. He was like you, kind, strong, but stubborn too. He loved you more than anything, even though he only had 6 months with you. This photo, it was his happiest moment, holding you in his arms. I bowed my head, staring at the photo in my hand, my fingers gently tracing the face of the man, my father, Jonathan. His smile was radiant, his eyes sparkling as if they held the entire world, and the baby in his arms, me, was grinning carefree. That moment, though I couldn't remember it, suddenly became the most precious thing I had ever touched. But alongside the joy came a sharp, aching pain, as if my heart were being crushed. I had lived 25 years without knowing this man, without knowing I had been loved like that. And now, with the truth laid bare, I felt a greater sense of loss than ever before. I looked up at Grandma, tears silently streaming down my face. Grandma, tell me more about him. I want to know what my father was like. My voice trembled, almost pleading. I needed something to hold on to fill the void that this revelation had carved into my heart. Grandma sighed, pulling me to sit on the chair, her frail hands gripping mine as if afraid I might vanish. Jonathan, she began, her voice lowering, as if flipping through pages of long, dusted memories. He was our youngest, 10 years younger than Reed. Maybe that's why your grandfather was always stricter with him. Reed always followed your grandfather's wishes, but Jonathan was different. He had a fire in his heart, a sense of freedom that your grandfather, with his rigid mind, couldn't understand. She paused, her gaze distant, as if she could see Jonathan standing right before her. When Jonathan was 18, your grandfather arranged a marriage for him with the daughter of a wealthy family in Omaha. He thought it was the best way to secure Jonathan's future and the family's. But Jonathan, he refused. He said he wanted to live life on his own terms, to love and marry the person his heart chose. That was the first time he defied your grandfather, and it was also the last. I listened, feeling a jolt run through me. My father, a man who stood up for himself, who defied the world to protect his love. I smiled instinctively, though tears still rolled down my cheeks. So, who was my real mother? I asked, my voice softening. I suddenly realized I hadn't just lost my father. I knew nothing about the woman who gave birth to me. Grandma squeezed my hand, her eyes reflecting a deep, profound pain. Your mother, Emily, was a wonderful girl. She worked at a small cafe in Kearney, a place Jonathan frequented. They fell in love, Gabriel. A fierce, genuine love, but one your grandfather didn't approve of. Emily had no wealth, no status, just a warm heart and a smile that made Jonathan willing to give up everything. When Jonathan announced he wanted to marry Emily, your grandfather was furious. He said Jonathan was disgracing the family, that he wasn't worthy of being his son. He disowned Jonathan, kicked him out of the house, and cut off all contact. I felt like I couldn't breathe. So, what happened to my mother? I asked, though a part of me dreaded the answer. Grandma lowered her head, her voice dropping to a near whisper. Emily was pregnant with you when she and Jonathan married in a simple ceremony, with no family present. They lived in a small apartment, happy despite having little money. But then, when you were 6 months old, Jonathan was in an accident. A truck lost control on the highway, and he was gone forever. Emily was completely shattered. She didn't have the strength to raise you alone with no family, no support. She gave you to Reed, hoping you'd have a better life. Then she left and no one knows where she went. Your grandfather and I looked for her, but it was like she vanished from the earth. I sat in silence, feeling as if a black hole were swallowing me whole. My father died in an accident. My mother left, abandoning me like an orphan. And I, for 25 years, had lived in a family that didn't want me, didn't love me. I clutched the photo to my chest, tears soaking my father's face. Why didn't Grandpa take me in? Why did he let Reed raise me? Grandma wiped her tears, her voice trembling but resolute. Your grandfather thought letting Reed raise you was the best way to give you a home, even if it wasn't perfect. But he was wrong. Every time he saw you, saw how Reed treated you, it was like a knife to his heart. He knew you weren't happy, but he didn't have the courage to face his mistakes, to admit that he had pushed Jonathan away, and now he was letting you suffer. She paused, taking a deep breath as if summoning the strength to say the most important thing. When your grandfather knew he didn't have much time left, he decided he had to do the right thing. That will, that letter, that photo. It's how he made amends to you and to Jonathan. He wanted you to know the truth, to know that you were loved, that you are the most precious legacy of Jonathan, of your grandfather, and of me. I looked at her, a tidal wave of emotion surging within me. Pain, anger, but also relief. I didn't blame her, didn't blame Grandpa. I knew they had done all they could, torn between guilt and love. I hugged the photo tighter, feeling the warmth of my father's face, even if only through a picture. I don't blame you or Grandpa, I whispered, my voice choked. I just wanted to know who my father was. I want to remember him. Grandma hugged me, her tears falling onto my shoulder. You're so much like him, Gabriel. He would be so proud of you. And your grandfather, he was too. He left everything to you, not just the money, but the truth, the love he couldn't give Jonathan in time. I sat there in Grandma's arms, feeling both broken and mended. The truth about my father, my mother, the years I was shunned, it was all like a storm sweeping me up. But in that storm, I found a small flame. The flame of love my father, Jonathan, had for me, even if only for 6 short months. And that flame, along with Grandpa's will, would be the strength to carry me forward. But I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Reed, Monica, Marcus, they wouldn't let me take what they believed was theirs without a fight. I looked at Grandma, my eyes more resolute than ever. Grandma, I'll do what Grandpa wanted. I'll claim what's rightfully mine. She nodded, a faint but trusting smile on her face. I know you will, Gabriel, but be careful. Reed, he's not someone to underestimate. Your grandfather foresaw that, which is why he hid this will. You have to be strong, like Jonathan, like yourself. I nodded, clutching the photo and letter tightly to my chest. The family storm was approaching, and I, Gabriel Hanat, would have to stand tall to face it. I decided to call a family meeting, not for reconciliation, but to reveal the truth. I contacted Mr. Harold Grayson, my grandfather's lawyer, and he agreed to assist. Are you sure you want to do this, Gabriel? He asked over the phone, his voice calm but laced with concern. Reed isn't someone to take lightly. You need to be prepared. I know, sir, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. But I have to do this. For Grandpa, for my father, and for myself. The meeting was arranged at Mr. Grayson's office in the same small room where not long ago the false will had been announced. I arrived early, carrying the envelope containing the new will, the letter, and the photo. Grandma sat beside me, her frail hands gripping mine tightly, her eyes resolute but unable to hide her worry. You're doing the right thing, Gabriel, she whispered. Your grandfather would be proud of you. When Reed walked in, the air in the room grew heavier. He wore a gray suit, his cold eyes sweeping over me like a hawk eyeing its prey. My mother, as usual, followed at his side, her face impassive, lips tightly pressed. Monica and Marcus trailed behind, Monica with her familiar sneer and Marcus glaring at me with open hostility. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. This wasn't the time to be afraid. Mr. Grayson stood, his voice ringing clear in the quiet room. Today we are here to discuss an important matter regarding the will of Mr. William Hannett. Gabriel has brought forward a new document, and I ask that everyone listen carefully. Reed smirked, leaning back in his chair. "What's this nonsense now?" he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "I thought everything was settled." I stood up, clutching the envelope, my heart pounding. "No, it's not settled," I said, my voice stronger than I expected. "Grandpa left a new will, legally notarized, and I want everyone to know the truth." The room erupted. Reed shot to his feet, his face flushed with anger. "What? A new will? You're making this up, aren't you, you bastard?" The word bastard hit me like a familiar knife, but this time I didn't bow my head. I looked straight into his eyes, feeling a fire ignite within me. "That's right, I'm not your son," I said, my voice calm but sharp. "I'm Jonathan's son, your brother. And Grandpa left a new will giving 90% of the estate to me. You only get 10%. I opened the envelope, pulling out the will and the letter, placing them on the table in front of Mr. Grayson. The lawyer picked them up, examined them carefully, and nodded. "This document is legitimate," he declared. "It was notarized on September 15th, 2024, after the previous will. By law, this new will takes precedence and supersedes the old one." Reed lunged forward, snatching the will from Mr. Grayson's hands, his eyes blazing. "This is a forgery," he roared, his voice trembling with rage. "You think you can fool me with some pathetic piece of paper, Gabriel? You're nothing but a nobody with no right to anything in this family." Monica and Marcus jumped up, their voices joining the storm. "He's lying," Monica shrieked, pointing at me. "He's trying to steal our inheritance." Marcus stepped closer, his fists clenched as if waiting for an excuse to knock me down. "Who do you think you are?" he growled. "You're nothing." I stood my ground, refusing to back down, though my heart pounded like it might explode. "I'm Jonathan's son," I said, my voice cutting through the chaos. "And this is Grandpa's wish. If you don't believe me, read this letter." I pushed Grandpa's letter toward Reed, but he only glanced at it, his eyes full of contempt. "A letter? Did you write it yourself?" Reed tossed the letter onto the table, turning to Mr. Grayson. "Harold, you can't believe this. This kid is trying to scam us all." Mr. Grayson remained calm, adjusting his glasses. "Reed, I verified it. This will was notarized by an independent notary with 2 witnesses' signatures. It's completely legal. If you wish to contest it, you can take it to court, but under the law, this will prevails." Reed turned to me, his eyes burning with a fury that seemed to scorch the air. "You'll regret this, Gabriel," he snarled. "You think you can take me on? I'll make sure you lose everything." My mother, speaking for the first time, used a voice as cold as ice. "Gabriel, you should stop before this goes too far. You don't belong in this family. Don't try to do the impossible." I looked at her, the woman I once called Mom, and felt my heart constrict. "I never belonged in this family," I said, my voice trembling but firm. "But I'm Grandpa's grandson, Jonathan's son, and I won't let Grandpa down." Monica let out a sharp, icy laugh. "He thinks he's a hero," she said, turning to Marcus. "He has no idea who he's up against." Marcus stepped closer, his voice low and menacing. "You want a war, Gabriel? Fine, but you'll lose, and you'll lose everything." Grandma, who had been silent until now, suddenly stood. Though small and frail, she radiated a strength I had never seen before. "Enough," she said, her voice ringing like a command. "Reed, Monica, Marcus, you should be ashamed. William chose Gabriel because he knew you weren't worthy. You only care about money, while Gabriel cares about his father, about the love William left behind. You want to sue? Go ahead. But the truth won't change." Reed stared at Grandma, his eyes blazing with anger but tinged with a hint of wariness. "Mother, you're siding with this kid?" he asked, his voice trembling. "I'm siding with the truth," Grandma replied, her voice unwavering. "And the truth is that Gabriel is my grandson, Jonathan's son. William did the right thing, and I'll testify to that." The room fell silent, broken only by Reed's heavy breathing. He looked at me, then at Grandma, then at Mr. Grayson. "This isn't over," he said, his voice icy. "I'll sue. I'll turn this upside down. He won't get a single cent." He turned and stormed out, my mother, Monica, and Marcus following behind. The door slammed shut, leaving me, Grandma, and Mr. Grayson in the heavy silence. I sank into the chair, my body drained. But inside, the fire still burned. I had dropped a bomb on this family, and now the real battle was beginning. Grandma took my hand, her eyes filled with trust. "You did the right thing, Gabriel," she said. "But be prepared. Reed won't stop easily." I nodded, clutching my father's photo tightly. "I know, Grandma, but I won't give up. I promised Grandpa, my father, and myself." The days following the family meeting left me on edge, like a tightly wound string ready to snap. Every small noise outside my apartment door, every call from an unknown number made me jump. Reed's threat, "I'll turn everything upside down," echoed in my mind like a curse I couldn't shake. I knew he wasn't bluffing. Reed Hannott wasn't the type to easily let go of what he believed was his, especially when it involved $15 million. I became more cautious. I didn't keep the new will or Grandpa's letter in my apartment. I entrusted the originals to Mr. Grayson, Grandpa's lawyer, who locked them in a safe at his office, while I kept a certified copy. The photo of my father, Jonathan, holding me. I carried it in my wallet, always with me like a talisman. It reminded me that I wasn't just fighting for money, but for the truth, for the love my father and grandfather had for me. But Reed and my siblings didn't leave me alone. A few days after the meeting, I received a call from a local reporter. "Is this Gabriel Hannott?" The man's voice came through, brimming with curiosity. "We've heard you're trying to forge William Hannott's will to steal the family fortune. Care to comment?" I froze, feeling the blood rush to my face. "Who told you that?" I asked, my voice trembling with anger. "A reliable source," the reporter replied evasively. "Word is, you're not Reed Hannott's real son, and now you're trying to seize the estate with a fake will." I hung up, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. Reed. It had to be him, or Monica, or Marcus spreading these lies. They didn't just want to take back the estate, they wanted to ruin my reputation, to paint me as a fraud in everyone's eyes. I called Mr. Grayson immediately, recounting what had happened. He sighed over the phone. "I was afraid of this, Gabriel. Reed's playing dirty. You need to be even more careful." Things got worse a few days later. One night, returning to my apartment after a long day at work, I found the door had been pried open. My heart pounded as I stepped inside, only to see my apartment ransacked. Drawers overturned, papers scattered across the floor, even the small safe in my bedroom broken into. Thankfully, I hadn't kept the will or any important documents there, but the thought of someone invading my private space sent chills down my spine. I called the police, but they only filed a report and said they'd investigate. Deep down, I knew Reed was behind it. He, or Monica and Marcus, had hired someone to find the new will, to destroy the evidence before I could take it to court. I started feeling like a hunted animal. Every day I checked the doors, the windows, ensuring no one could break in again. I even asked Ethan, my close friend from college, to keep a certified copy of the will in case I lost mine. Ethan, with his straightforward and loyal nature, agreed without hesitation. "Gabe, your family is a mess," he said, shaking his head. "But I've got your back. Call me if you need anything, okay?" But the storm didn't let up. The local media began covering the Hannott family inheritance scandal. Tabloid articles popped up calling me an opportunist, a bastard child trying to steal the family fortune. One piece even dug into my past, claiming I was a troubled kid, shunned by the family for improper behavior. Every word in those articles cut like a knife, but what hurt most was how they smeared Grandpa, saying he was manipulated into making the new will. I wanted to scream, To tell the world that Grandpa was the most honorable man I'd ever known, that he chose me because he trusted me, because he wanted to make amends for my father. Public opinion began to shift against Reed, Monica, and Marcus when a few of my grandparents' old neighbors spoke out. They recounted how Reed treated me coldly when I was a child, how my grandparents always protected me. One article in the local paper quoted a friend of Grandpa's. William Hannott wasn't someone who could be manipulated. If he left his estate to Gabriel, he had a damn good reason. Those words comforted me, but I knew the battle wasn't over. Reed hadn't played his final card yet. The legal battle began like a true storm. Reed hired an expensive team of lawyers from Omaha, led by a man named Victor Crane, infamous as the Will Destroyer. They filed a lawsuit demanding that the court declare Grandpa's new will invalid, claiming that he was not of sound mind when he made it and may have been coerced. Each accusation hit me like a punch to the gut, but I wasn't surprised. I had seen the look in Reed's eyes during the family meeting. He would do anything to keep that money. Mr. Grayson and I prepared meticulously. He helped me gather evidence, medical records from Grandpa's doctor proving he was fully lucid in his final months, testimonies from the notary and 2 witnesses present when Grandpa signed the new will, and hospital records documenting how Grandma and I cared for him during those 6 months. I knew we had the upper hand, but every day stepping into the courtroom felt like entering an arena, with Reed and his legal team as lions ready to tear me apart. The first hearing took place at the Kearney District Court. I sat at the plaintiff's table beside Mr. Grayson while Reed, Monica, and Marcus sat across from us, their eyes cold and sharp as knives. Victor Crane stood, his voice smooth but menacing. "Your Honor, we have reason to believe that Mr. William Hannott was not of sound mind in his final days when this new will was created. Furthermore, we suspect that Gabriel Hannott, who is not the biological son of Mr. Reed Hannott, took advantage of Mr. William's weakened state to coerce him into altering the will." I clenched my fists under the table, struggling to contain my anger. Mr. Grayson placed a hand on my shoulder, whispering, "Stay calm, Gabriel. We have the truth." He stood, his voice calm but powerful, presenting the medical records and the notary's testimony. Mr. William Hannott was fully lucid when he signed the new will. He discussed his decision with me in detail, and I can confirm it was his true intent. Grandma also testified. Though in her 70s, she stood tall, her voice clear and resolute. "My husband William knew exactly what he was doing. He loved Gabriel and wanted to right the wrongs of the past. This will was his way of protecting his grandson, whom he considered as his own son." Her words choked me up. I looked at her, feeling a surge of strength, but Reed's legal team didn't back down. They relentlessly questioned, twisting the truth, even suggesting that Grandma might have colluded with me to deceive Grandpa. Each question was like an arrow, but Grandma answered with a calm sincerity that even made the judge nod. The decisive hearing came like a tidal wave. After weeks of litigation, today was the day the court would deliver its verdict. I walked into the courtroom, my entire body tense. Grandma sat beside me, holding my hand tightly, her eyes reassuring me that no matter what happened, she was there. Reed, Monica, and Marcus sat across the room, their expressions brimming with confidence, as if certain they would win. Victor Crane stood, delivering his final argument. "Your Honor, we are dealing with a clear case of manipulation. Gabriel Hannott, who has no direct blood tie to the family, exploited Mr. William Hannott's weakened state to seize the estate. We request that the court declare the new will invalid and uphold the original." I felt a rush of anger surge through me. I wanted to stand, to shout that Grandpa wasn't someone who could be manipulated, that I never coerced him. But Mr. Grayson signaled for me to stay quiet. Then he rose, his voice ringing with conviction. "Your Honor, Gabriel Hannott is not only Mr. William Hannott's grandson, but also the son of Jonathan Hannott, whom William sought to make amends for. This will is not the product of manipulation, but the final wish of a man seeking to right a wrong." I asked to speak. With the judge's permission, I stood, my hands trembling as I held Grandpa's letter. Your Honor, I began, my voice shaky but growing steadier. My grandfather, William Hannot, was the most honorable man I've ever known. He wrote this letter to me, to tell me the truth about my father, about his love for me. I'd like to read it. I read each line, my voice breaking as I spoke of Jonathan, of Grandpa's regret, of his wish to protect me. When I finished, the room was silent. Grandma was in tears, and I saw a flicker of emotion in the judge's eyes. "I'm not doing this for the money," I said, looking straight at Reed. "I'm doing this for Grandpa, for my father, and for the truth." Grandma was called to testify one last time. She stood before the court, her voice trembling but powerful. "William told me he wanted Gabriel to have everything because he was Jonathan's legacy, our family's legacy. He was lucid until his final moments, and I swear this will reflect his true wishes." The judge, a stern-faced woman, looked around the room. After a moment of deliberation, she struck her gavel. "Based on the evidence and testimonies, the court declares the will dated September 15th, 2024 to be valid. Gabriel Hannot is entitled to 90% of Mr. William Hannot's estate. Mr. Reed Hannot will receive 10%. The room exploded. Reed slammed the table, shouting, "This is a farce!" Monica and Marcus sat stunned, their faces pale. I sank into my chair, feeling as if an enormous weight had been lifted. Grandma hugged me, her tears falling onto my shoulder. "You did it, Gabriel," she whispered. "Your grandfather would be proud." Reed turned to me, his eyes burning with hatred. "You haven't won yet, Gabriel," he said, his voice icy. "You'll pay for this." But I wasn't afraid anymore. I had faced him, faced the family, and I had won. Not for the money, but for the truth. As the courtroom door closed behind Reed, Monica, and Marcus, I felt a fresh wave of air fill my chest. For the first time in my life, it was as if I could breathe freely. Grandma held my hand, her eyes gleaming with pride mixed with tears. "You did it, Gabriel," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Your grandfather would be smiling from heaven seeing how strong you are." I hugged her tightly, feeling the warmth from her frail body, the only person in this family who truly loved me. The court's ruling didn't just grant me 90% of Grandpa's estate, stocks, real estate, and assets worth over $15 million. It gave me something far more valuable: recognition, the truth about my father, and the courage to stand up for myself. But I knew this victory wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a new path, one I had to forge for myself. In the weeks that followed, I began taking control of Grandpa's estate. Mr. Grayson guided me through each step, from transferring shares to managing properties in Nebraska and Iowa. The sheer scale of it overwhelmed me, but I refused to let it blind me. I didn't want to become like Reed, living only for wealth and power. I wanted to use this legacy to create something meaningful, to make Grandpa and my father, Jonathan, proud. I decided to start an architecture firm, a dream I had nurtured since my college days. With the capital from the estate, I bought a small office in downtown Kearney, hired a few passionate young associates, and began taking on our first projects. Every sketch I drew, every structure I designed carried a piece of me. Of the days I sat with Grandpa listening to him talk about the buildings he'd constructed. Of the dreams my father, Jonathan, might have had. I named the firm Hannot Designs, a tribute to Grandpa and my father, the two men who gave me the strength to stand tall. I cut off all contact with Reed, Monica, and Marcus. After the trial, they bombarded me with threatening messages, harassing phone calls, and even tried spreading more rumors to tarnish my name. But I didn't care. I had learned that those consumed by greed weren't worth my attention. I blocked their numbers, erased them from my life, just as they had once tried to erase me from the family. Public opinion gradually quieted, and those who knew Grandpa began to see me differently. Not as the bastard child, but as a man who fought for the truth. Grandma was the only one I kept close. I convinced her to move in with me in a new house not far from the old wooden home she shared with Grandpa. At first she refused, saying she didn't want to burden me, but I held her hand and smiled. "Grandma, You're my real family. I want to take care of you just like you took care of me." She finally agreed, and I can't describe the joy of seeing her smile, watching her plant golden daisies in our new garden, hearing her recount stories of Grandpa and my father. One afternoon, as the soft golden sunlight flooded the living room, I hung the photo of me, Grandpa, and Grandma back on the wall. Beside it, I placed the picture of my father, Jonathan, holding me as a baby. I stood silently, gazing at the two photos, a wave of emotion surging within me. These weren't just pictures, they were my legacy. Not the money, not the properties, but the love, the truth, and the courage that Grandpa and my father left behind. I touched the photo of my father, whispering, "Dad, I don't know you well, but I promise to live a life worthy of your love." Then I turned to Grandpa's photo, smiling. "Grandpa, I did it. I'll live a life worthy of the trust you placed in me." Grandma walked in, placing a hand on my shoulder. "You're so much like Jonathan," she said, her voice gentle. "He always believed in doing what's right, always fought for it. And you, Gabriel, you're the pride of both of them." I turned and hugged her, tears falling silently. I was no longer the lonely boy shunned in Reed's house. I was no longer the bastard child they called me. I was Gabriel Hanno, son of Jonathan, grandson of William, and I had found freedom. Freedom to live true to myself, to love, to build a life I could hold my head high for. The family storm had passed, leaving scars but also a profound lesson. True love is stronger than blood, and justice, though delayed, will ultimately prevail. I stepped out into the yard, looking at the golden daisies glowing under the sunlight, and smiled. My life now was truly beginning.